إن في خلق السماوات والأرض واختلاف الليل والنهار لآيات لأولي الألباب.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to our program Islam and Science. And today on our topic, we are going to discuss stress. Stress, as modern life, we all aware, it's a phenomenon that is present in everybody's life, which have been expressing a profound influence on our physical, mental, and emotional lifestyle. This is an in-depth synopsis that where we are planning to explore into the concept of stress from a spiritual standpoint and delve into its comprehensive array of strategies and approaches for its management. With me today in the studio is Movi Yusuf Abdul Khalik, a missionary of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, Ghana. Movi Sab, welcome. Joining us online for this discussion is Dr. Aziz Hafiz Sab, who is a medical practitioner and a lecturer in the University of Leeds. Dr. Sab, assalamu alaikum and welcome to the show.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, Brother Sadiq and Mulvi Khalik. Pleasure to be on. Thank you for having me on.
Welcome. We would go straight to the discussion, the topic on board. And I would want to start with my guests here, Movi Sab. Movi Sab, if I may, what is the nature of stress? When we say stress, what do you mean by stress, and how does it manifest in our life?
Stress is generally regarded as the pressure of force exerted on an object. But psychologically, it becomes an issue when it's the pressure on the body or on the mind, on our state of mind, goes beyond the required measure. It is something quite natural for each and everyone to go through stress, more importantly as one of the creative principles of life. Allah the Almighty already informed us in Holy Quran, judging from an Islamic perspective, that that is, each and everything works against its own kind, which means there is always an interaction between each and every object. And now we are talking about human mind states. So the pressure that is exerted on the state of the mind within whatever comes from within the body, from within the mind, or from outside the world becomes a sort of pressure on the mind, and that creates stress. So it now depends on if it is mild or it is excessive. As far as the capacity of man is concerned, God Almighty has put a particular point of equilibrium to the state of man when it comes to his mindset, that when he's within that equilibrium state, then everything will be fine. So Allah the Almighty told us in the Holy Quran, La yukallifullahu nafsan illa wus'aha. That is, God Almighty has not burdened any mind beyond its own capacity. So on a general scale of the creative principle of the world, everything stands to work out when they are on a certain measure Allah the Almighty puts. But as man is a being that always have to move forward from one stage to the other, because there is many stages to life and want to progress at each and every point, being part of the creative principle as well, Allah the Almighty informed us, La tarkabunna tabaqan an tabaq. You will definitely have to move from one stage to the other. That is a decree for our life to continue to progress. So within that point in time, there is this idea that man may move beyond the limits for which is required. But at that same point in time, God Almighty has created other mechanism to relieve that pressure from man. So the Holy Quran gave us an awareness of this, saying, Wallahu yuridu an yukhaffifa ankum wa yuridu Allahu an yukhaffifa ankum wa khuliqal insanu da'ifa. That is, God Almighty always wishes to reduce the pressure on you. The stress that is you are going through, that is the goal of God Almighty, because God Almighty knows that man has been created weak, which means we are not omnipotent. We are not so powerful beyond certain limits. So when we get to our limit, we get a chronic point of stress. We get to a chronic point of stress, and by that we face a whole lot of difficulties to cope with things within our surroundings. But when we reverse back to the normal state, either we do that through our own mind state, or through the withdrawal from what we are engaged in, or through some medical means, then we get back to the equilibrium state within the creative mechanism God Almighty has given us, then things will be fine again. But to capture it all, when we go beyond the limits of the burden that is supposed to be on us, the pleasure, then we are stressed out. And when we return to the normal system in the mechanism of our creation, then everything appears to be so fine.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. So that will mean that stress is as a result of man moving out of the balanced nature in his progress. And it is also a mechanism that help ensure that we go in the right way. Okay, Jazakumullah. I would want to delve into the scientific understanding of stress and its management. And this one, I would want to turn to Dr. Saab. If you can elaborate or educate us on that, the scientific understanding of stress management.
So, thank you. Just to move on from there, Maulvi Saab very eloquently discussed the issue of equilibrium and disequilibrium. And I think that is the essence of understanding stress management. Stress in itself is a natural mechanism. It's a natural reaction within the body. You'll have commonly heard of the concept of fight or flight. So this is an innate response that has been pre-programmed into our bodies by the Creator to help us survive certain extreme situations. You know, if we are being chased by some wolves, or we are in a very acutely challenging situation, this sets off a reaction of hormones of cortisol and adrenaline within the body. And these hormones themselves, they enable the varying systems within the body to be on standby, to be on high alert. The eyes become dilated, the heart rate increases, the breathing rate increases, energy, it gets utilized in a very effective way to ensure the body is ready to move and ready to move fast. So it's an instant response like this. So this is designed and programmed for a benefit. However, the challenge that we have is when you have prolonged exposure to stressors and varying factors, that instead of being an acute event, it ends up being a chronic event, i.e. it ends up becoming a long-term exposure constantly, consistently to certain factors that cause stress. And studies have shown that there is a deep impact on the body, not only a psychological impact, but a physical impact as well. And there are many diseases and illnesses that currently that we suffer with, that we know that are exacerbated by stress. Heart disease, diabetes, asthma, a whole host of conditions that if we are exposed to a chronic amount of stress, then these things have a negative impact on the body and end up actually causing physical harm and physical damage. The scientific studies have analyzed the brain, analyzed the makeup of the brain, and they have been able to show that in situations where there is a prolonged exposure, there are certain neuronal changes that can be visualized and can be seen within the brain and cause certain changes. So there is a very deep link. There is a deep scientific link between stress and its impact on the physical body, as well as on the psychological and mental well-being. So that's the key thing here. Thank you.
You talked about cortisol and adrenaline as the stress hormones. And you equally mentioned the fact that these are programmed so that they are useful to man under circumstance where there's flight and yeah. So I would want to know under what circumstances does this acute condition or program, so to say, tend to become chronic? What are some of the contributing factors that leads to stress?
So there are so many factors that can end up becoming chronic. For example, let's look at people in conflict zones that are exposed to constant fighting, civil war, risk of attack. So the body is constantly heightened on heightened alert. So that heightened alert ends up having an impact. Then on the psychological point of view, if there are certain psychological pressures, for example, there are pressures to perform in your work environment, there are deadlines to achieve, even in an educational pursuit where there are deadlines for work. However, if these become protracted and these pressures become constant, that adrenaline release and that cortisol release becomes a chronic issue, and that's when we then start seeing the negative impacts of that.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. And following up to that, in managing these situations, what are some of the measures you would advise? Is it medically speaking to manage stress, and how to go around it in that respect?
So this is a very, very pertinent question, and a very long discourse can be had on this. That would be very, very. Let me start by taking a step back. There's lots of studies that have been done in terms of the things that can be done to help alleviate stress. So a lot of these are based on our lifestyle, based on our activities, based on relaxation, and based on how we can control our bodies and minds in such a way to be able to reduce the impact of stress. And one key area that I want to share with you, especially in line with what Maulvi Khalid Sahib has alluded to at the beginning, that there is a large body of evidence now that suggests that altruism, the doing of good to others, actually has a huge physical as well as a psychological benefit to improve your health. So there was a huge study in the United States carried out with over 10,000 people, and they were effectively asked 3 questions. They were asked, do you volunteer? How often do you volunteer? And then the reasons why you volunteer. And those reasons fall in two areas. Firstly, there are reasons for your own being, selfish reasons, that I want to improve my well-being and I want to improve my self-confidence, etc. And then the other reason is people that had what we term an altruistic reason. So people had a greater good. Either they wanted to benefit society, they wanted to help others, or in the case of religious communities, they felt it was a God-given instruction for them to help others. So these were the questions that were asked, and these were 10,000 people that they surveyed over a period of time, and they followed them for at least, I think, 50 plus years. And it's very interesting what they found. They found that those people that volunteered had far better health than those that didn't. And within those people that volunteered, those that volunteered for altruistic reasons, those that volunteered for the greater good, they had even better health outcomes in this. So this was a very interesting scientific study that I really wanted to share with you, because it highlights that there are mechanisms that are within the gift of human beings to be able to control the impact and the effects of stress. And primarily, they are the doing of good to others. And this day, many religious communities, the Ahmadiyya Muslim community in particular, espouses this across its members. However, a lot of scientific analysis now in the modern world, you hear things such as mindfulness, and there's a lot of work going on in terms of improving one's well-being and doing activities to improve that, improving your diet, exercise, social activities, helping to be a more active and engaging citizen within society. And all these things actually have a beneficial effect on one's ability to manage stresses. It has a relaxing and calming effect. And these things then, by definition, help reduce your blood pressure. And there are scientific studies, again, that have been looked at to see the impact of this. So overall, it helps to reduce the stress, and it helps to reduce the physical harms of stress.
Okay, thank you very much. So well spoken with the scientific examples and the need for us to be doing good. I would tend to Maulvi Saab. Dr. Saab have quite elaborated on how to manage stress. There is this saying that prevention is better than cure. Yeah, so before we even get stress itself, how do we avoid stress in the first place, and what is the Islamic understanding on this?
All right. There are many things that comes in line with managing a thing, and the first thing is understanding what it is and what may lead to it. Many times people come to assume that any negative aspect, things that lead to stress are negative. But as far as the Islamic concept is concerned, it can be negative and it can be positive as well. So Allah the Almighty tells us in the Quran, وَنَبْلُوكُمْ بِالشَّرِّ وَالْخَيْرِ فِتْنَةً. Yes, we put you to this trial of stress from what is good and what is bad as well. Therefore, the burden of having too much wealth, for example, can actually be a point that will stress man out. The burden of having too much children or enjoying something beyond the limits can actually lead to it, either in time of enjoyment or suffering. The way suffering can also put a greater level of pleasure on the mind. That is why you see someone can be so rich, so rich, a billionaire, you still see the person sitting under full AC, still sweating. That means there is a certain, another type of level of stress the man is going through. Otherwise, it's not something a poor man would ever think of. That, come on, I'm sitting under AC and I'm still sweating like that. So as far as the Islamic concept is concerned, I mentioned the other time the state of equilibrium to everything. That is why the Holy Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam has told us how to manage this affair by telling us, khairul umur awsatuha. That is the equilibrium state. The mild nature is the best of each and every affair. That is when you are not stressed out, you haven't gone beyond your limit. Otherwise, any other thing going beyond the limits will always create a certain level of stress, and you always need something to correct it, to bring it back to the normal state. Now, there are many ways to bring things to the normal state, which we learn in Islam. One of it is our human relation. More importantly, we have the concept that you need to change environment to relieve stress, sometimes you need to change the state, especially when the psychological state already affects the physiological state of man. Then you'll be advised on this. So in Islam, for example, when we see someone who always frown, the Holy Prophet ﷺ, someone came to the Holy Prophet ﷺ to seek an advice. He just told him, La tagdob, stop getting annoyed. He repeated it again and again. Do advise me, do advise me. La tagdob, la tagdob. Do not get annoyed, because annoyance actually produces more of the adrenaline. That is the understanding behind this. Likewise, the Holy Prophet ﷺ told us that, we also learned this in the system of Islam, that bashashatul wajhi atiyatu saniya. Having a cool face, a welcoming face, serves as a second gift. So I'm referring to this in the aspect of the environmental relation. When someone comes to you, comes to meet you, the person is already stressed off. But the cool face, the joyful face, the cheerful face you meet the person with actually relieve a certain level of burden from the mind of the person. So by that, we are able to manage stress in that way in Islam. There are still other ways to manage stress in Islam. And I would say the most important aspect of it is what we know as getting closer to God Almighty, or meditation. I'm not talking of any other type of meditation. There are a series of ways of meditation, but we consider the best of it to be the closeness to God Almighty. And we do not take this from our far, but directly from the Holy Quran. We are given the message that Allah bi dhikrillahi tatma'innul qulub. Verily, with the remembrance of God Almighty, the heart finds solace. So if the heart finds solace with the presence of God Almighty, then it means you're already getting someone to comfort you at each and every moment of stress. You can, for a believer, the stress of the world might be huge for any other person, but for a believer, it is a different level, because he knows when the stress goes beyond the limit, he knows there is a particular place to return to find solace. I always enjoy this statement of Hadrat Masih Maud Hazrat Imam Mahdi alayhi salatu wasalam, when he said, Bushra lana inna wajadna mu'nisan, Rabban Rahiman, Kashif al-Ghamma'i. Bushra lana, congratulations to us. Inna wajadna mu'nisan, we have found a comforter. Rabban Rahiman, he is the merciful God. Kashif al-Ghamma, that removes our anxiety, that takes our anxiety away. So that is the idea that comes to the mind of a believer when it gets to the point of stress. But for someone who is not a believer, the Quran already mentioned their own state as well, that وَمَن يَعْشُ عَنْ ذِكْرِ الرَّحْمَنِ yes, whoever lives without the remembrance of the gracious God, then فَإِنَّ لَهُ مَعِيشَةً ضَنْكَ, such a person will have a strained life. That is because he doesn't actually have anything that relieves him of the pressure that comes on his mind intermittently.
Okay. So thank you very much. That will mean that we need to be keeping on a smiling face, as well as meditating, getting closer to Allah. That is one sure way of avoiding stress. Okay, so with time not really being on our side, we would want to get back to Dr. Saab. If you can briefly, just in a minute, tell us one lifestyle change that one can use to get rid of chronic stress, just in a minute.
Yes, again, I just reiterate what I mentioned earlier in terms of key factors. So being altruistic, doing good for others, keeping yourself busy in voluntary work, that's one area. Looking at diet, ensuring that you have a good balanced diet. There is no extremes of one or the other. Regular gentle exercise within whichever part of the world that you may be in. Regular exercise, ensuring that there is a routine and ensuring that there is a discipline and an organization within your daily schedule. All these things will discipline the body and hopefully ensure that the damaging effects of stress are not impacting on you.
Very well. Talking about chronic stress, what other lifestyle changes does Islam also recommend in a minute?
Yes, the Holy Prophet ﷺ has given us a great lifestyle change, especially when it is a stress that attacks on a spot, that before you get to that exasperated state, you first look at the condition you are. For example, if you are standing, the Holy Prophet ﷺ advised that you sit immediately. And if you are sitting, then it is advised that you lie down. And even if that doesn't work, the Holy Prophet ﷺ advised that you take a cup of water or you perform ablution. That means during the moment you are taking all those steps, you are actually trying to divert yourself away from the excessive stress you are going through within that point in time, just to move yourself to a state of equilibrium. I'm just referring to that in the aspect of what attacks you, that attacks your mind immediately. As for the one that is of a lengthy period of time, then you always need to go back into direct worship of God Almighty, because as I mentioned the other time, Allah bi dhikrillahi tatma'innul qulub. With the remembrance of Allah, the heart finds solace.
With the remembrance of Allah, the heart finds solace. Thank you very much. But before we bring the program to the end, I would want to take your last words. If Movisab, you would take the lead.
Okay, my last word would be some simple advice of Hadrat Khalifatul Masih Thalith, rahimahullah ta'ala, when he brought out this scheme of smiling. For the general populace, they would, when you mention this to be a scheme, they feel like, what's the meaning? But what actually goes on nowadays shows that in order to relieve stress, we need this type of scheme. Meaning, instead of meeting people with certain level of anxiety and annoyance all around, then let's keep a smiling face, and we'll actually be able to relieve some other human being of the stress their mind is going through. I mentioned the other time, Bashashatul Waji Atiyatu Saniya. A cheerful face is a second gift.
Dr. Saab, if you can grace us with your last words.
I would actually second what Maulvi Saab has just said from a scientific point of view, as well as obviously he's mentioned from a spiritual point of view. A smile actually creates a series of reactions within the body that helps having a calming effect, a soothing effect, not only on the individual that's smiling, but also on the individual that is being smiled at. So I think both the science and the faith corroborate this one key issue here.
Okay. Jazakumullah sana jaza. Viewers, this will bring us to the end of the program for today. We just like our guests have said, remember to keep a smiling face all the time to help relieve stress from you and from your brother. With that, we say thank you, Jazakumullah, till we meet again next time. Assalamu alaikum.